Hello, everyone. I'm Connor Henderson. I'm joined by two PhD students at the University of Oregon, Bryson Hilton and Jessica Canfield. You two want to say hello?
Hello.
Well
Hello,
done.
hello.
All right. They're going to help try to make this a more lively interaction presentation than it would be if I was by myself. So I thank both of them for their time. So I'm a marketing strategy researcher and professor in terms of teaching, and I am teaching this course online for the first time. It's odd times, March 29th, full-fledged coronavirus, and we're going to start out with some lectures that are recorded. Then there'll be some exercises. Those discussions may take place on Zoom, or they might take place through our Canvas section. And after kind of each video you watch, there might be an assignment and then some discussion component. So this is starting point number one. We're going to start out big picture, just talking about the fundamental concepts of marketing strategy in a kind of loose orientation way. So we're going to cover some key topics as what is marketing strategy, what do we mean by that term, the formal definition, the simple idea. We'll introduce a marketing strategy framework, which integrates some key concepts and key questions all in one page that you can use to think through your own marketing strategy or the marketing strategy of any business you come across. And then we'll talk a little bit about business models and strategy and optimal distinctiveness theory, which I think is a relevant theory for marketing strategy. Okay, so starting with a joke. I have a very funny sense of humor. No. So complaining is not a strategy. This is Jeff Bezos. Amazon is kind of, super dominant company when it comes to marketing strategy. He issues his annual reports, and I kind of comb through those and take them for inspiration. Ironically, complaining is a strategy if you're competing against Amazon because so many companies have failed to attack them head on. They've looked to legislation and kind of the government to try to step in and help them compete with Amazon. But so what is strategy? What do we mean by it? I'm going to try to make this a little bit more lively by pulling in Jessica and Bryson and asking them what they think strategy is. But in order to do that, we'll start with something more concrete, which is right now what's on our mind is coronavirus, COVID-19, and obviously it's a big threat to everyone, everywhere. And so what is the different strategies that you've come across that have been talked about in the media in terms of countries dealing with coronavirus? Jessica, I know you are a big tracker of infectious disease as one of your areas of interest. So what have you seen in the media that's related to strategy in terms of what people have talked about with how to respond?
In terms of countrywide strategies
Yeah,
for companies,
no, more countrywide.
well, there's some countries that are definitely more aggressive than others and taking more of a aggressive stance in terms of how fast and how aggressively they're implementing social distancing or isolation slash quarantine strategies. And
Yeah,
there's others that are definitely trying to see how it plays out before they take those strategies.
uh-huh. So quarantine, social distancing, um, shutting down borders, right? Restricting the
Hmm.
flow of people and trying to limit the spread of the virus, slowing the curve or slowing the spread. Um,
Right.
what other strategies have you come across?
There, there are also economic
Yeah,
strategies.
what do you see there?
From what I've seen, there's kind of a range from strategies of suspending payments. So, for example, businesses or homeowners don't need to pay their mortgage or rent, all the way to sending out money to everyday citizens and just cutting them a check.
Yeah, there's dealing with the medical, biological impact of the virus, and then also the economic impact of the virus as, it's difficult. Let's say 2009, what do you do when the economy comes to a halt? You want to provide some fiscal stimulus, try to get people spending money again. But to fight the virus, if you quarantine or social distance, reduce information, reduce not the spread of information, but reduce the spread of the virus, it's by shutting down activity, right? So if we all just stayed inside for 2 weeks, the virus couldn't spread from one host to another, and then it wouldn't be able to continue to live as it either conquered its host or got conquered by the host immune system. Uh, so, yeah, it's kind of difficult in terms of what the physical remedy is. Have you heard of any other strategies besides trying to just do social distancing or limit the kind of exposure of the virus to fresh hosts? Um,
Well, I think the antithesis of that is to expose the entire population as
yeah.
rapidly as possible.
Well, yeah. Maybe not as rapidly as possible, but almost like all at once. Yeah, let's just get this over with. Have you heard the term herd immunology or herd immunization?
Yeah.
So what's that? What's that represent?
The idea behind it, as far as my understanding, is a lot of the reason why vaccines are used. And the idea is that
Yeah.
not everyone will have access or choose to get a, in this case, disease. Well, you're not choosing to get it, but
Yeah.
they won't be exposed. But
Yeah.
if it's better if more people are immune to it to protect those that aren't immune.
Yeah. So uh, if we had a vaccine and we got 80% of people to get vaccinated, then if let's say I had the virus and I coughed, and you two were both vaccinated, it would kind of fall on people who were unreceptive to the virus, and so then you couldn't go ahead and spread it to someone else. So unless I encountered someone else who didn't have immunization to it through um, a vaccine or through having already encountered it, then it wouldn't be able to spread any further. Uh, and so the idea with herd immunization is if you can just keep all the people who are like most dangerous, let's say the elderly and people with a compromised immune system, kind of at home just for a brief amount of time and let everyone else get sick at that same exact time, then all those people will get basically like a vaccine, a painful vaccine, worse than a shot, just being home with fever for 2 weeks. But then their immune system would be robust to the virus, and then you can kind of open up your economy again. And then if, let's say, someone from another country came in with the virus, they just wouldn't have anyone to affect. So the UK, I think, for a while said, let's go with this herd immunization. That's a great idea. And then they're like, oh, maybe that's kind of scary because our healthcare system is going to be completely overwhelmed. Another strategy is not so much focused on trying to like test and find people and then track them and make sure that like anyone who is tested positive, we can track down anyone they came in contact with. So that's trying to like prevent the spread of it, right? Another thing is more focusing your resources to mitigation. So assuming someone is sick, do we have like enough ICU beds, ventilators, viral, antiviral medications that might work. So if we have like X capacity of resources, we could pour those into trying to test and track people who are infected and try to limit their exposure to new people. We could put that effort into social distancing, shutting down schools, shutting down businesses, and using some big fiscal policy to try to limit the long-term economic impact. Or we could take all those resources, let's say, in the case of the U.S., we just, I think, announced like a $2 trillion spending bill. We could take that money and say, like, let's just pour all that money into antivirals, building out protective equipment, and trying to get, basically all of our efforts so that the people that do get sick get the best care possible. And so that would be like another strategy potentially, right? Is not so much in stopping the spread of the disease, but just mitigating its impact and trying to like limit the mortality rate. So you could kind of, I don't know, debate what's most likely to work. or what would be most effective, what would be the least impactful, and it sucks because it's like basically trading off the how much is a human life worth. Let's say a 99-year-old person dies, but they're only going to live to be 100 years old anyways, versus like a 20-year-old. Well, how does that, you know, what's the value of that? Everyone's going to disagree. So yeah, it's no easy decision, but I kind of waffle back and forth in my mind, like because it's unclear like what the true mortality rate is, what the mortality rate would be if hospital systems got overwhelmed. Is testing worthwhile if it's like it's not that effective? You can have false positives where someone's not infected but it says they are, or false negatives, or just the act of testing, right, requires a lot of healthcare capacity. So you need protective equipment, skilled people to do the testing. So, but all this is, I think, the most important strategic decision making that's going on in our society right now. And so it's, very much relevant to the idea of what is strategy. Have you seen any good arguments out there in the media for doing one thing or another, or what's kind of your take on all this? Either of you? Shy? Or just bored?
Um, I think that there's not enough information right now to be able to tell what's the best approach
Yeah.
versus, and I think that what I saw the other day was talking about if we look back on this in however many months and say, wow, we overreacted, that's not a bad thing by any means.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the best case snenario.
Yeah,
I think
overreact in
that's
terms
just what
of trying to mitigate the spread,
right,
or
yeah.
on all fronts.
I think on all fronts
Yeah.
even, but definitely in terms of the spread as well.
Yeah. Bryson?
What's interesting to me is that just as I look across what the media is reporting on and just social media in general, is a lot of people are comparing this kind of as a tension between other risks that we take as a society. So,
Yeah.
for example, roughly 1 million people each year die from smoking-related
Yeah.
diseases. Should we clamp down on smoking just
Yeah.
as hard as we're clamping down on
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
coronavirus?
Yeah. Or driving and drunk driving, or um, yeah, various other. Yeah. So it's like that's a good thing that comes up in kind of strategic decision making is what's the opportunity cost? What's the other kind of ROI, return on investment, available option that we could pursue? Maybe we can't actually make a big difference on coronavirus, but we could, with $2 trillion, like get self-driving cars developed so there wouldn't be any more DUIs and accidents on the road. And it's like, maybe our actual return on that big investment would be better spent on something other than fighting coronavirus. The other big obvious one is like global warming. How much $1 trillion have we invested in fighting global warming? Like zero. Maybe that's actually a better place to have a like larger societal impact, or on education or whatever, right? So that's a good point. It's like not just in terms of other things that kill us, but just of all other options we could spend money on, and thinking about the impact on society, and not just money, but just like resources, talent, how much human capital is going into this. Strategy is wrestling with all those decisions. So usually we think about things like relative advantage, where we look at our own competency, right? So if you're China and you have an authoritarian government and you're allowed to track people on their cell phones because there's no civil liberties that are preventing you from doing that, you can just put in a massive quarantine and basically stamp out the spread of the virus very effectively. Like very impressive what China was able to do. Taiwan and Hong Kong have also done a good job. South Korea as well. What are their relative advantages? What buttons did they push in terms of kind of reacting as a society, as a healthcare system, to the threat of the virus. So Hong Kong and Taiwan are both, well, Hong Kong's kind of a semi-island, right? But Taiwan's an island, so they have much greater information on who's coming in and who's leaving, even though they're highly densely populated, versus New York City, right? You have Manhattan's kind of an island, but they have much less insight over who's coming in, who's coming out. So like in Taiwan, apparently they have a medical ID for each person who enters the country, and apparently they built up this whole information infrastructure in response to the SARS outbreak in 2009. So, the relative advantage of an authoritarian government like the Chinese Communist Party is very different than in the U.S., where our relative advantage might be more in freedom of exploration, where like all these different companies might pursue their own, or different medical companies, biotech companies might pursue their own different strategies or solutions, and then maybe you're more likely to discover a happy accident in that way than you would if you had a more centralized planning. But you can't do some of those strict quarantining that is super effective in that we saw in China. So if we go back to the world of business, relative advantage, right? You're thinking about other companies that are trying to serve your same customer, and so the competition there, is more well defined and more on friendly grounds. Our competition right now is like the virus, right? So understanding the nature of this virus versus another virus, and what's its strengths, what's its weakness, how's it spread, right? So one thing that sucks about this virus is apparently a lot of people can have it for a long time and be spreading it without having any symptoms. So it's very difficult to rely on people to self-volunteer to get tested if they're not experiencing any symptoms. So that's like a characteristic of the competition that changes what our options are in terms of levers we can push. Versus like something that's transmitted only through blood or sex, or something that's less obvious, or less. It's more obvious when you've been exposed. In this case, it's less obvious that you've been exposed if you just touch a surface. So again, it's harder to track down people who might have been exposed if you find one person who has been exposed. Dynamics is just how things change over time. So in this case, we have one big dynamic factor is exponential growth, which a lot of people don't understand, but it's just that like things aren't growing linearly, right? An extra 10 cases a week would be linear growth. It's exponentially, where it's growing on a percentage that's compounding, so like compound investments. And uncertainty is there too, because we really don't have a good idea of the total population of people that have been exposed. So we don't have a good guess at the true mortality rate. We just have such little information all over the place. I heard Germany is going to try to randomly sample people and do blood draws where they look at the serum to see if someone has antibodies to the virus, and then that would be a way of having a better idea how many people have actually been exposed, how many people have recovered, what's the kind of current state. Some other things we're uncertain about is how long would you be immune to it if you got exposed, right? So herd immunization kind of relies on this idea that like once you've been exposed and you've beaten it, you'd be immune for a long time. We're not really that certain how long people would be immune to it once they've defeated the virus. So all these are factors that are relevant when we're talking about strategy. Anything else that comes to your mind when I'm talking through these?
Nothing specifically yet.
No. Okay. We'll go ahead and look at the definition from the American Marketing Association. So I like this definition a bit. It's now about marketing strategy, not just strategy as a whole. So it describes the direction the business will pursue within its chosen environment and guides the allocation of resources and effort. So kind of the three words that I really like is direction. One thing I like about direction when we think about strategy is it explicitly talks about going somewhere, and less obviously, but inherent in picking a direction to pursue is you're saying no to other options. So one thing I don't like about our own government's response to the coronavirus is we haven't we've just kind of done a lot of like shotgun, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, kind of helter skelter, instead of being focused and aligned. And if we just said, all right, everyone stay at home for 2 weeks, we're not going to allow anyone into the country, we're going to do lots of testing, like we could have kind of quarantined this a bit better. Or if we said, like, we're not going to spend any effort trying to, basically test and track because it's just too hard to do. So we'll just put all of our effort into building out ventilators and mitigating. They're trying to decrease the mortality rate once someone has been infected. Like that maybe could have worked as well, but it's like we didn't pick either or. We kind of pretended like we were doing testing, but we weren't, and we also weren't building out ventilators. So it's like we're not doing a good job of quarantining and tracking, and we're also not doing a good job of investing in mitigating once someone has been infected. So if you have a clear, well-defined strategy, you're going to pick a direction to pursue, and that's going to kind of raise or make it more obvious that you're going to take other options off the board. And I think that's a kind of healthy exercise to say, like, okay, if we're going in one direction, where are we not going? And then you kind of come to terms with that and say, okay, we might not pursue this attractive opportunity, but it's because it's not the best of our full consideration set. The next aspect here is the chosen environment. In business, right, we often try to think of all the opportunities that are available and pick which one is best for us. Obviously, it's dynamic, though, and it's uncertain and changing. So, like, right now, obviously, a lot of businesses had their plan and they liked their environment, but then the environment switched on them in a big way. Lastly, we're talking about the allocation of our resources and our effort. So we have some capacity, whatever it is, human capital, social capital. How are we going to bring that to bear on, trying to move in the direction that we've chosen? So that's the formal definition. The simple idea is we're coming up with some big picture theory of where we want to compete. We're going to focus all of our effort and resources on where we can be better or different. And when we talk about where, it's like inferring some location or a direction infers some location. We don't actually necessarily mean like a geographic location. We mean that we're going to understand the differences in customers and kind of create a map of the world in terms of differences by customers, and then focus on a particular customer segment where we think we can add value. Make sense? What am I missing in all that? Is that a decent coverage of marketing strategy as far as you know it?
Looks good to me.
Yeah. What else? I'm trying to think. This is, I guess, pretty vague. That's one thing I would criticize it for in terms of when we actually get to marketing type decisions. We're talking about like brand management or customer management or product management. It gets maybe more relevant to the decisions a marketing manager would face, but big picture coverage of stuff. Okay, focusing on the competitive environment or the chosen environment, usually there's some generic strategies that you might choose depending on your competitive environment. All this comes from kind of originally with Michael Porter's work on competitive environment, and so he talks about 5 forces that are kind of describe how healthy an industry is. And so, do either of you know these off the top of your head? Bryson, you have an MBA. I'm just quizzing you for...
We did take a class on Porter's 5 forces, but you're holding my feet to the fire now, and I may be failing.
Well, I imagine that my students will remember the 5 forces about as well as you did. Unfortunately, the sad part of our profession, being professors, is we teach students things and then they don't necessarily hold on to them. But hopefully they're changed by the ideas, whether or not they remember the vocabulary. I'm less concerned with vocabulary than how we kind of view the world. Okay, so maybe you'll remember them after the first one. First one is the first threat. So the first threat is the threat of substitutes. And the second threat is very related to substitutes. It's new entrants. So if you think about what's a substitute and what's a new entrant, how do you distinguish between the two of those? Do you know for that?
Um,
Or what's your kind
I'm
of
just
guess?
I'm just thinking off the top
Yeah.
of my head right now,
Yeah.
but it seems to me that substitutes are readily apparent. So, for example, for my alarm, I can
Mm.
use my cell phone. I could use Alexa. I have tons of
Mm.
different. Oh, I just set off
Yeah.
Alexa by saying that. But
Hello,
so
friend.
I have a bunch of options that are readily available to me versus a new entrant is going to be an option that's just not readily available, but now enters the scene.
Yeah. So I think that makes sense with our common vocabulary, but that's not how I think of the difference between the two. Jessica, do you have any um, thought on that? Or have you been exposed to this at all?
Um, I've been exposed to Porter's five forces, but I don't know how I would articulate it
Okay, so I'm,
different than Bryson.
yeah, I'm going to use my own way of thinking about it, but the way for me is a new entrant is conquering the same customer problem or customer need, right? So you're trying to address the same issue with a very similar offering. So wanting to be um, being alerted that you need to do something new, right? An alarm would solve that, and so an Alexa or a a watch would solve that. Um, but a substitute is something that's again addressing the same um, kind of customer need, but it's a completely different offering. So it's not using the kind of same tools in the same form and the same function to accomplish that kind of high level customer need. So like if you think about like entertainment, let's say, and you had all these comedians who provided entertainment, and then that was like the main comedy entertainment of its time, and then all of a sudden there's let's say
TikTok.
TikTok. No, I'd say that'd be more. I want to do improv, like improv, right? Improv was like this new form of in-person comedy entertainment, right? Um, and so I'd say that would be a new entrant to like this in-person uh, comedy format. Okay, or you could just say like a brand new comedian comes up, right? So like there were these 10 comedians, and now a new comedian comes up. Um, versus a substitute would be like instead of going to the theater and experiencing live comedy, you might go on like YouTube or TikTok, or it's like another place. You might read a book, right? That's a funny book. So it gives you amusement, it gives you um, entertainment, it gives you kind of levity and laughter, but it doesn't. Kind of like this class right now that we're doing, hilarious. Um, this would be a substitute for going. Thank you, Bryson. Good laugh. Uh, yeah. So does that make sense? So new entrant is the same form factor, or very similar form factor, very similar offering to what already is out there. And so you might think of like barriers to new entrants, right? So if you're a dentist and your friend notices that like you have a new dentist office and they're like, I want to be a dentist too. I'll open up my own dentist office. Like they'd get in trouble because they haven't gone to dental school. So like having to go to dental school and getting the certification is a restriction that restricts the threat of new entrants. But like if they just give you floss and a toothbrush and say take care of your own teeth, then that would be a substitute. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think so, but just to make it more, or just to provide another
Yeah.
example, how would you view orthodontists versus Smile Direct Club?
Nice. Yeah. So um, that gets into a little bit of a gray area because again, they're both trying to solve the same customer need, so it could be either one in terms of that. The form factor of an orthodontist is, this in-person, face-to-face form factor. So I think that offering is unique enough that I would classify it more as a substitute than just a new entrant. But there's some gray area, as you kind of say, like, to what extent is this new offering similar or related to this existing offering? Um, the further they're apart from each other and like the way they're solving the problem, the more likely you would say that that is a substitute. Um, so substitutes are like are different, but can provide the same value. Complements is another way of thinking about substitutes and complements. Complements are also very different, but they go together nicely, like beer and baseball, right? Those are complements. I guess not if you're playing, but if you're watching, they're complements. So, excuse me. Um, so substitutes, new entrants. I like talking about them. I think they're fun. I'm gonna go through this a little bit right now. So like, what do all of these things have in common? You got a watch, a timer, credit card, notepad, calculator, GPS, music player, video games, camera, flashlight. What do all of those have in common?
Cell phone.
Yeah, yeah. The cell phone has made them all obsolete. Well, maybe not obsolete, but you used to have one of those, and now you don't have to have one for the general case. You might have one just for a very specialized use case. So the cell phone, right, the modern smartphone, came in as a new entrant in the phone category, right? BlackBerry and Apple iPhone came in as a new entrance, but then the software on it that can be kind of use case specific and always changeable made it such that it also provided a substitute for a lot of these other products that existed before. I used to have a bit of a relationship with people at Energizer Bunny, the battery company, the marketing team
Mm-hmm.
there, and they were like, man, things were so good with digital cameras. Like their business was booming. I don't know. It used to seem like all the time on TV you'd see a commercial for like Duracell or Energizer Battery because everybody had these digital cameras and they would just burn through batteries and they were just making tons of money. Also, flashlights and other things too. But it was like this one place where you needed energy power that was um, kind of mobile and light and durable and would last, and that you really wanted to depend upon, so they could charge you a big price because you like, definitely wanted your battery working when you were going to take your picture of like some sunset, right? And so they were just crushing it, and then the iPhone came out, and the camera kept getting better and better, and then Samsung came out with their smart Android smartphone, and those cameras were even better, and like all of a sudden like digital camera use just plummeted, and it's only now people with like Jessica, you have like fancy camera, right?
Yeah.
And
Well, I like photography, so
yeah, but you use not just your iPhone to do photography, right?
right.
Yeah. Do you use rechargeable like lithium ion batteries for your cameras?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So now
Yeah.
you're not even using like an Energizer disposable battery.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, so they've got destroyed. Um, what they probably should have done at the time is like done some co-branding with a phone or something, some lithium ion company, and just like even if they didn't use their technology inside, maybe they could use like partner with some new lithium ion battery company. Um, but if they could have like said like Energizer battery inside, kind of like Intel inside, and so you'd like buy this, either a phone or a camera that had like super great battery life because they're always advertising their battery life, and just lent all that brand equity that Energizer had built up over time, then they could kind of still exist as just kind of like a brand. But pretty much now they've like plummeted in usefulness. And they're in terms of new entrants, they also got hit up by Costco and Amazon coming out with their own battery lines that were kind of store brand batteries. So like Amazon Basics, we just kind of use them for all of our battery needs. So um, rough times for the Energizer and Duracell of the world. Uh, so yeah, it's a good game to play, like substitute versus new entrant. But those are not the only forces that are relevant. We also have to think about buying power. So how much power do our customers have over us? Like, are we able to raise prices without fear of them just balking and walking away? Are we actually providing a lot of value that they perceive and are willing to pay for? And supplier power, right? How much power does our suppliers have over us? If either, you know, we have only one supplier and we're completely dependent on them, we're kind of screwed. They can eat our profit margin. If our buyer has other suppliers, then we're also in trouble. So both of those are kind of the two sources of power of people in the supply chain. And then these are the threats of competitors. And then 5 is just like rivalry. So basically, how many competitors are there, and kind of how much is there like equal power shared versus just like one dominant player. So sometimes we have market-based economy, and in order for that to kind of function well, we need to make sure that there's not like one provider with too much power. So sometimes we'll break up big companies to try to increase the amount of rivalry, which hopefully will increase competition, increase innovation, and just make it a more competitive environment. So basically, whichever industry you find yourself in, you'll see a few different companies that pursue these 3 different strategies. One is being a low-cost provider, so that might be like a Walmart. 2 would be differentiation, so having some aspect of what you do being different and better. And the third one would be niche. So like differentiation maybe would be like Nordstrom, who just says like we're going to be different by being just the best in terms of customer service. And we can do that by having a moderate amount of scale. So we have locations all over the West Coast, so that if like you buy something in Seattle and then fly to LA for a wedding and there's a problem, you can go into an LA store and they can help you. Or like a small niche company wouldn't have many locations and wouldn't be able to provide that same level of service. And then a niche company at the bottom would be like a boutique company who has like maybe great knowledge about some small niche in kind of fashion. So you could just buy like cheap jeans from Walmart. You could buy nice jeans with great service from Nordstrom, and you could buy like kind of the most fancy, hard to get jeans from some like boutique, right? Another way of kind of talking about these generic strategies is identifying what is the value that customers get and what's required from the company. So in order to be the low-cost provider, you need to invest in operational excellence such that you have high efficiency and basically low costs on a per unit basis, and that allows your customers to pay the least. Product leadership, you need to invest in being like the furthest or most extreme on some dimension of what customers value. And then customer intimacy is the strategy behind number 3. So really knowing your customer, having a sense of relationship, connection, meaning, all that kind of keeps a niche alive. Especially where customers want to be different, so they don't want to be treated like everyone else. There's some need for uniqueness that you can provide. Okay, so in this world, today's day and age, I have a company called CloudKitchens to kind of talk about. So do either of you know about CloudKitchen?
I've never heard of it. Is it a real company?
Yeah, it's a real company.
Yeah, my understanding is Travis.
Yeah,
I can't pronounce his last name,
Kalanick.
but who started Uber?
Yeah,
had just started this company.
Yeah, so when he was CEO of Uber, Travis Kalanick, he basically got in trouble because Uber was basically embarrassed time after time for various culture-related missteps, be it kind of the things that happen to customers and riders or drivers, or also things that happen with their employee base. And so eventually he got kind of kicked out because there was this whole movement called Delete Uber. Anyways, he's no longer CEO of Uber, but he kind of good timing for him. By getting kicked out and not liking being kind of associated with Uber, he decided to sell all his shares in Uber before coronavirus, and the stock price was much higher, so he made billions of dollars. And he's invested in this new company that he is running called CloudKitchens. And basically, they're kind of like Amazon Web Services for restaurateurs. So, Amazon Web Services is like if you want to start a new company, and instead of buying a bunch of like computing power to run some like online services and databases, and you can just rent the computing power and services you need from Amazon over the internet. And so it's really good for startup companies who like might be growing fastly, and so they couldn't own their own infrastructure and kind of build it out, and just wouldn't make sense to kind of set up a bunch of expensive computing if you don't yet have customers. So Amazon Web Services is basically the number one computing provider in the world now, where it used to be like Hewlett Packard and Dell and IBM, where they would sell equipment to companies and companies would manage their own computing needs on their own site, right? And they're in person, right, on their own premises. And so the idea is they could do a similar thing with kitchens for delivery companies, right? So if I could make a mean spicy taco and I didn't want to take the time to set up my own restaurant and I just wanted to make great tacos and have people deliver them, I could go to Cloud Kitchens. They would already have a kind of space set up, like a warehouse that had been permitted for cooking, had already kind of passed all the tests that a city would require, and I could go ahead and start making tacos, and then they would help me sell through Uber Eats, Grubhub, DoorDash, etc. So the kind of value proposition is you can lower your operational costs because they're going to do things at scale, right? They're going to buy like a huge warehouse and fill it up with all these different restaurateurs, where if each one went independently, they would all experience higher costs. So there's economy of scale savings. You kind of pay on an as-needed basis, right? So you don't have to invest a bunch of money up front. You don't need like a bank loan necessarily. And then if you're growing and if things are working, they'll have excess capacity that you can use and you can fill. So it's kind of a smart business model for this day and age, especially as people are like not even able to go out and experience restaurants, but still want to have food delivery, right? So this doesn't have the in-person seating component that restaurants have, but it still has like the food innovation and production. And then, if you're a restaurateur, you could just create a menu, get it set up, and then eventually these, you know, basically Cloud Kitchen could take care of the rest. So they're coming in as kind of a substitute, you would say, for uh, maybe like um, restaurants that specialize in takeout, I guess. No, they'd be a new entrant for that. They'd be a substitute for maybe cooking at home, because you're getting food sent to your house and you don't necessarily want to do all the prep and work to cook at home, but you're going to eat in your home, right? So having the meal at home that's, tasty and good, but not as expensive as going out to a restaurant. That's where it would come in as a substitute, but it'd be a new entrant for any restaurant that does food delivery, like Domino's Pizza, something like that. And they're really focused on themselves for being an operational excellence, low-cost provider, and then they're basically going to facilitate other, creators and restaurateurs who might specialize in product leadership. So being like the best in some category of food that would work well for delivery. Kind of a cool company. I like to kind of track them. I've had a number of students go and work for them. So, although Travis Kalanick is a controversial figure in the world, he seems to maybe have the Midas touch when it comes to creating companies that make a lot of money. Like he started Uber during the recession of 2009, and now this Cloud Kitchens I think is going to do really well coming out of whatever the responses to coronavirus. But how about Calm.com? Either of you know of Calm?
I have heard of Calm.
So
It's a meditation app, right? Yeah, I
yeah,
can see
I
it on
have
there.
the app.
you have the app. Are you an active
I
user?
use it.
What's your
I am
review?
not an active user, but
Have
I
used
had
it?
my moment.
Yeah.
I had a few months with it.
When you were taking my class, needed some
Yes.
needed some calm.
Yep.
Um, yeah. So like, Calm is a meditation app. What else do they kind of tout as their value proposition to customers?
When you look at their advertising,
Hmm.
the main value proposition is sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's something they've kind of pivoted into or discovered. They would interview their users, or at least some of their users, and ask them about their experience. And although they kept having all these people do meditations where they would tell people, okay, sit up straight and don't fall asleep, all these users would use it just to fall asleep. So like, all right, let's embrace that. And now they have like bedtime stories, right, read by celebrities. And a lot of people have
Yes,
trouble
Matthew
falling
McConaughey.
asleep. Yeah, Matthew McConaughey does Calm. Nice. So, yeah, they're a new entrant, I'd say, in terms of guided meditation. But they're a substitute for a lot of things. So, like, what are all the things we use to stay calm and kind of come down at the end of the day, right? So, you could say alcohol. You could say sleeping pills. You could say, um, I don't know, like TV or books that people use, right? So, like, they're in terms of a substitute, which is something that's trying to solve the same customer need but through a different means, right? There's a whole category of things people use to kind of ease into the end of the day. Um, but in terms of new entrants, they're really kind of going after a very dispersed, non-centralized um, ecosystem of people that would do like small trainings in meditation. And so there that industry was kind of characterized by a low barriers to new entrants, um, and a low level of rivalry, no, a high level of rivalry because there's so many different providers, and all of them had relatively low supplier power, but there's a lot of buyer power. And so Calm being an app, they can scale up and have a Matthew McConaughey be involved in it because they have so many customers paying so much money that they can kind of just take a teeny bit from each of them and then invest that in having like celebrities or whomever, people who are great at meditation on their app. So they've done great. They've raised a bunch of money. They're valued over $1 billion. Their user growth is incredible. I imagine it'll keep going up, as people feel a lot of stress given the uncertainty we face, both to our economy and um, kind of this actual medical threat that's a big deal too. So it's kind of interesting. Try to highlight throughout the term different companies that are well positioned given the kind of unfolding shakedown of our economy, where there's a lot of attention being spent on all the companies that are getting crushed, like obviously travel companies, right? Airbnb is not very happy right now. All the airlines, cruise ships, hotels, etc. But there's also going to be other companies that are going to become more important and more valuable and add more in this current times. Can either of you think of any other companies that um, might do well in kind of moving forward 2020? Ones that you've noticed? It's kind of more fun to think about the downfall.
DoorDash,
Yeah, DoorDash.
Instacart.
Yep, Instacart's trying to hire like crazy. I think it would be great if somehow Instacart could partner with some of these testing companies. So like if you knew your DoorDasher had the antibodies, like if it was like DoorDash verified or something, like oh my gosh, I would pay so much premium money right now to have someone like bring me groceries who wasn't like who maybe already was infected but is like now has a clean bill of health. Um, but yeah, all these health apps, right? Now's the time to shine. Um, testing, home testing. I remember there's this company called Q Health a few years ago that promised to do at-home influenza testing. Never came off the ground, but they wanted to do also like other hormone type testing and a bunch of stuff you could basically do at home. They raised a bunch of money, but never launched. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of new companies. I think for our students, right? The challenge isn't just focusing all on the doom and the dread and all the companies that are going to go out of business, but trying to think like, okay, what are the companies that are going to do well, that are going to grow? I remember thinking like during the last financial crisis, so Bryce and we graduated, I think around the same time, but so many of my friends were struggling to get jobs during the financial crisis of 2009, 10, 11. And like Uber began then, Airbnb began then. Like so many companies really took off around that time. And I was like, man, if I had only had the foresight to join those companies, I could be so rich. Um, I mean,
Indeed.
yeah, I mean now like Airbnb's crashing down and Uber's crashing down. But if like you joined Uber and sold your shares when they IPO'd, like life would have been good. So those certainly be a lot of companies that are kind of rising from the ashes of this.
Would you classify that as environment? Like when you go back to that marketing theory definition, it included environment.
Yeah, the chosen environment. Yeah, so it's
Like for yeah.
totally. So it's basically, you know, the the environment has changed, and so where are you going to choose to allocate your resources, your effort, your talents? What skills are you going to invest in building out for yourself as you kind of try to navigate this new world? I think for our students who are like 20 something years old, most of them, like they don't have to be too concerned with the health threat for themselves. And so if they can just channel their energy into building out their skill set and researching companies that are going to do well in the new environment, like they can come out of this actually quite well. Just there's not going to be like a nice cushy job waiting for them in 3 months when they graduate, even though it's like the best job market of all time, like 3 months ago. Um, but we kind of went through that too, and so the challenge retrospectively would be like, okay, let me think through this environment. Let me think through the implications. Let me become obsessed in learning about different companies that are doing something new that might be more important or more relevant in this post-coronavirus world that will soon be in less than a year. Um, and so yeah, you can have the perfect plan and the environment can change on you, and then that's life. But now that the environment has changed, how do you respond? I think that's the most critical question for people thinking about their own strategy of how they allocate their own resources, their own time, their own effort. But I don't. We'll try to talk about different companies throughout the term, and if you guys think of them, please share them. We can maybe even create a discussion board on Canvas that's just like list of cool companies that might be growing, and if they're growing, they're going to be hiring. So even though the economy as a whole is going to be contracting, there'll be areas of growth for sure and opportunities. Um, excuse me. I should edit out my coughs and verbal stumbles, but we'll see how much energy I put into this as I allocate my own resources between teaching and parenting and surviving. Okay, next slide is that any marketing strategy needs to address 4 fundamental problems. So these problems are going to be relevant for any time you evaluate a business, product strategy, brand strategy, customer strategy. If you're not thinking through them carefully, you're probably doing a bad job. So in my class, if you have a case, you might formally create bullets around these, or you could just informally integrate them into your responses. You'll score higher. Okay, so the first one is customers are different. There's heterogeneity. That just means that there's lots of differences on many dimensions. And so, we talk about being snowflakes as millennials or what's the generation after millennial?
Gen Z.
Gen Z. I heard a millennial is anyone you don't like. Like they're a millennial. Seems to be what happens on the Twitter. So yeah, Gen Z or I think some people call us snowflakes, right? We're so protective and we want to be special, and any insults will melt us. But no, I'm using snowflake in the positive term, like our kindergarten teacher told us, you're all beautiful as snowflakes, unique in your own way. That's how customers are. And that's a problem because how can you efficiently serve customers when they're all different? Well, there's commonalities, right? Common needs that all humans have. We think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's also, if you think, push this snowflake metaphor further, you can't hang out with all the snowflakes in the world, but there's different mountains where snowflakes tend to cluster. And so you can say, I'm going to climb that mountain. So that would be like a chosen direction to apply your efforts. And so the fact that customers are different shows up, all over the place. But here's one example that is kind of interesting. So CNN was the first all news TV station, right? When cable came out in 1980, CNN said, we're going to launch a station for the news that's going to be 24 hours a day. And at the time, people thought it was a stupid idea and that it was going to fail. And the reason why was basically like, we already have the 5 o'clock news, the 10 o'clock news. Like, news doesn't change that much between 5 o'clock and 10 o'clock. You can just watch one of them. You got the newspaper in the morning, you got radio. Like, they thought most people were served enough with news. But what they didn't think about was that some people have different schedules where it's not convenient to watch the 5 o'clock news. Some people are like retired and just want to sit at home and just watch news all day. Some people are like news junkies, so maybe they work in politics or just like love the news or whatever. And also there's going to be times in the world where people are going to have an increased interest in news, and so they're going to want the option to be able to watch the news, and so they'll subscribe to a cable bundle that has 24-hour news, such that if a war breaks out or a health crisis or some political scandal or whatever, it's like we can go there, and eventually people kind of develop habits of going there. And so CNN did awesome. It was extremely successful, and so it originated as this kind of new entrant that was providing something new to a set of customers who wanted one of those kind of access points to news. But then, as most markets do, they evolved from like some general provider who was serving some customers with some unmet needs to splintering off. And what happened was Fox News launched in 1996. Well, first CNBC launched in 1989. They're like, we'll focus all on business news, right? So markets, investing, what's going on in business. And they thought, that's a niche where there's people who will watch it who are kind of very valuable to a lot of companies who would want to advertise. So if someone's watching, the stock market news coverage, then they maybe are into investing, maybe they have high disposable income, and so advertisers might want to target them with ads. And so that launched in 1989. And then in 1996, MSNBC launched as kind of a copycat of CNN, and their thing was like, we're going to partner with Microsoft. So I believe that's the MS of MSNBC, Microsoft NBC, and they're going to like embrace the internet. And so it's like this internet and TV kind of new media. So they focused more on like distribution channels and really focusing on that. And then Fox News launched, and they took a different approach. They said like, a lot of people like the news for politics. We'll serve kind of half the country who is more interested in conservative oriented news coverage and opinion and policy. And in doing that, we might not get everybody, we'll get them, and we can kind of build some loyalty. And it turns out that conservatives tend to watch news more, where people who are more liberal tend to read news more. So it was a kind of fortunate move by Fox. And so because there's all these inherent differences across the customer base, it allows for different companies to enter and take a slightly different approach to what they're doing and be very successful. And I think Fox, along with ESPN, has been the most profitable cable channel out of all the cable channels there are. So, and ESPN is like, again, also news, but specialized around sports. So that's just one story around how customers are different, but in all markets, even the next thing is even throughout the day we change, right? So if you wake up in the morning, you want some coffee. In the night, you want some alcohol, right? So what you're interested in, fluctuates and changes every day, every month, throughout our lifespan. And so really being thoughtful and understanding how customers change, both on their own, both at a societal level, and both in relationship to us as a company. Whichever companies understand that best are usually going to outcompete the other company because they can build in different kind of dynamic aspects to their product, to their customer relationship management that better fit the changing needs and create a better relationship, better customer loyalty. So I have two pictures here. One is China, and it's the most important market for manufacturing, but also for growing customers for lots of different industries. So like the NBA just had to cut their salary cap for every team because Daryl Morey, the general manager of the Houston Rockets, criticized the Chinese Communist Party related to Hong Kong and the Hong Kong protests. And so they're like, well, NBA, you can't broadcast on our main TV channels anymore. And I guess more people watch NBA basketball in China than in all of the United States, which is, shows the potency of that market. But as that market opened up and allowed for outside companies to come in, they basically saw a lot of middle class consumers become and upper wealthier consumers become very interested in foreign brands, like what's the best of the world. And that kind of allowed some companies who even weren't even doing that well in Western markets to really thrive and succeed in China. So like KFC is one I heard that did very well. But now there's a lot more homegrown companies. So like, Xiaomi does cell phones that are very popular. There's NIO does electric cars. So Tesla's trying to go in there and also do electric cars. But NIO is a homegrown company in China. So you see more of this kind of change in the markets where it went from like super interest in foreign companies to now more of kind of an interest in homegrown entrepreneur led companies in and from different parts of China. So understanding how markets change, right, is super relevant now, especially with, what's going to change in consumer appetites after coronavirus, for example. It's going to impact higher education a lot. I just read some article in the Wall Street Journal about Australia, how like 8% of their export of services was basically education to China, having students from China come to Australia to study in college. And with all those students unable to come to Australia right now, or uninterested in coming to Australia, as like China is now a safer place to be, they expect to lose 8% of their whole GDP around services because of serving those customers or students through education, but also all the other related things that those students would be buying, like rent and just a living. So pretty crazy. This other picture is just a picture of it resonates with me as a dad, hiding on the bathroom, not actually using the bathroom, but pretending you are, where you're just looking at your phone or your tablet. So it's a commercial I'll show later in the term, but it's just a insurance company that's saying like, hey, we see you, we understand that you've going through life changes, and we're going to be with you through the different aspects of your life, from car insurance to homeowners insurance to life insurance, etc. And so I think there's a huge opportunity to outcompete anyone in any industry if you are kind of better understanding the dynamics in your customer base, both in how you relate with them, but also in the changes they're experiencing. And these two fundamental problems, that customers are different and always changing, always create an opportunity for a new company or a second place company to pick up on a subtle change and react to it, and then basically capture market share and become more important that maybe an incumbent company or the existing leader company isn't thinking through those two changes. So those are the probably two most important ones. The third one is that competitors react. So there's just, you do something that seems like a good approach, but they copy you or they do something different and you become disrupted. So like Uber and ride hailing is causing huge disruptions to the auto industry, especially in cities. So car ownership is going down. People are less interested in getting their driver's license when they turn 16. Um, that also might change city landscapes and like how many garages we need, especially once self-driving comes into play, which will also open up other industries. And that was all enabled by the smartphone, which does geolocation tracking. Amazon Web Services has allowed a lot more web-based companies to start up and gain traction. So like Netflix has their whole entire computing needs served by Amazon Web Services. And the last thing is goes back to kind of like Bryson's point at the very beginning is like, well, we're really focused on coronavirus, but there's other things that kill us. And so if we have limited resources, we should think through all the opportunity costs of if we're going to choose one direction, we're saying no to all of these other opportunities. And so if we have a good sense of what the return on investment of pursuing all those opportunities are, then we'll be better able to make that choice. And so if you're doing some marketing strategy type recommendations, some case overview, it's really helpful to acknowledge there's other opportunities, to think through like, I'm recommending we go here, but there's some uncertainties, there's some unknowns, and there's also these other options that are worth considering, assuming you have time to do a kind of full-fledged consideration. So recognizing that it's not always best to do like detailed analysis. Sometimes it's better just to be action-oriented and check. Jeff Bezos, going back to him and Amazon, has this nice analogy that or metaphor that I really like for this. So he talks about there's some decisions that are door A type decisions, and there's some decisions that are door B. And door A is where you can have data, you can run a little trial, you can experiment, you can see, and you can always back out. So he says let's always open those, rush through them, and see what's going on. Because you can walk through that door, and if it closes behind you, you can open it from the other side and come back. So he wants to empower a workforce with data, with skill sets, so that they can run quick experiments, see what's working, test, adapt, and try new things. But door B are doors where you take a step in this direction and you can't go back. So those might be like, if you, as a brand, present yourself in a certain way, right? You have some image that's going to keep you from, having another image because it'd be contradictory. That's kind of a dumb example, but like things that require like huge resources up front. And he wants those decisions to be all information to be kind of go up the chain of command, and he'll make the call on those big picture decisions where there's no turning back. And so he identified there's these two different types of decisions, and because resources are limited, one resource that's limited is the amount of time you have to debate and kind of try to make sure you make the perfect decision. And he says, I want to be action oriented for decisions that we can kind of come back from and allow people to fail and have a culture where people just try things. But then for door B, we're going to try to be very careful, study, plan, weigh our options, and once we commit to something, just go forward without thinking about what could have been, what should have been, woulda, coulda, shoulda. The other kind of idea here for resources are limited is find your lead domino. So of all the things you can do, what can you do now that's going to set you up to have more options later and make other things easier later? So that's like investing in your human capital. So if you don't have a good job waiting for you anymore when you graduate, similar to what happened when I graduated from my undergrad, that's a good time to invest in your skill set, your training. I think like Code Academy is doing free classes online for anyone affected by COVID. You can take classes on LinkedIn. You can do Salesforce training. You can learn, do online boot camps for data analysis. Whatever it is, you can up your general skills, and that will allow you to knock down doors further in the future. So some things, like generally early in your career, investing in learning and growing your skill set is better than like capturing as much salary as you can, because it'll open up opportunities later on down the road. So those are kind of two approaches to dealing with this fourth problem that resources are limited. So does that, Bryson, Jessica, help me out? I was just talking a bit. React to what I just said. Ask questions or just any commentary. Give me a break from talking. Are you there?
Should I go, Jessica, or do you?
You can go.
This is
Oh no.
highly entertaining content we're providing the
Um,
masses.
I will say this, and my mind keeps drawing back to environment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure why, but I was thinking back to the Calm example. And Calm picked their environment to be the Apple App Store,
Uh-huh.
which they focused on completely before going to the Google Play Store. But the Apple App Store, for those who have an iPhone, the big advantage is the credit card's tied to your credit card is tied to the phone so that you can just do one-click purchasing.
Mm.
And when I went through Calm's sales flow, they have mastered the art of getting you to one-click subscribe into an annual trial. And without that environment, Calm would have never been able to have grown the way that they've grown.
Yeah. So not just that, but also they can advertise on Instagram, right? And so you're already on your phone.
Correct.
You feel scattered or whatever. You're maybe feeling like envious of your friend who just went on a cool vacation or whatever. And so you like recognize like, man, I've been on Instagram for like 20 minutes. This is stupid. And then all of a sudden there's this advertisement from Calm that's like, breathe, relax, feel nice.
Yeah, be able to fall asleep.
Yeah, like and you're like, oh, this seems like appropriate. So like, and then it's just one click from that ad on Instagram to get over to um, the App Store. So yeah, I mean, certainly both of those being able to target people very precisely on Facebook and Instagram, and then having that go through Apple's purchase setting, both are extremely valuable. It actually started as calm.com. So it's kind of a cool name, right? Calm.com. Um, but yeah, they weren't growing very fast when they were just trying to have this web environment because, um,
Yeah, apparently they spent a full year just choking. Like they only got to around roughly $10,000, I think, a month in revenue.
yeah,
And then once they tapped into the
app environment.
I think what actually changed
Uh-huh.
is they started their company and then Apple created this system where developers could opt people into 7-day free trials.
Okay.
And I think it was that invention that,
Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of a, lucky for Calm that came about.
Yeah, the only thing that gives me concern related to Calm and what you're talking about is that when we talk about like power of suppliers, right? So they're relying on Facebook and Apple in that case, and both Facebook and Apple have tons of power. So Facebook with Instagram ads and Facebook ads, right? They're going to, the more useful they are in terms of targeting, the more they can kind of extract money from like this being the best way to reach these customers. It's not just Calm that's advertising for those customers. It's any other app that wants to get you to play like video games, right? That's one way of distracting your mind is like, let's just play video games. So like, it's all these different apps are basically flooding these Instagram ads, and then Facebook just like cha-ching, 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 and then you go ahead and you click on the App Store and you download the Calm app. Well, Apple now takes 30% of the money that's passing through them because they have the credit card stored and it's easy and it's one touch. So it's like you kind of just have to take that. I know that like Amazon, if you want to buy a book for the Kindle app, you actually have to go to the website outside of the Kindle app itself to buy the book because they don't want to pay the tax to Apple that basically is like that Apple's going to take a cut of revenue of anything that's sold through app. I think Netflix also might be.
Yeah, Netflix did that.
No.
Did the
I
same.
didn't realize that's why that was.
Yeah, and it's annoying for the users, and so it's like it's a good
Right.
example of why it's bad when companies have too much power because they're basically like, if you're Apple, you're like, well, we say we care about user experience, but we also want to make a lot of money off these services, these apps on the phone because our phones are so good, people don't need to buy them and replace them anymore, right? You can have the same phone for like 3 or 4 years. Um, and so they're trying to get as much money out of the subscription and the app sales and Apple Music, Apple Card, all these additional features. And sometimes they're providing a worse user experience in order to capture more revenue. If they brought down the amount of cut that they were taking from people who sold through the apps, if they took it from like 30% down to like 10%, I bet you Netflix would be like, all right, fine, like we'll just work through the App Store, or like Kindle would basically allow you to buy your book through the Kindle app rather than making you go to the website, which is annoying. But they must have done, the trade-off and said like, how much money are we giving Apple because people can click through easier, and both Apple and Amazon in that case are providing a worse user experience because they're just like unable to come to a resolution around who gets how much of what percent of the revenue. Kind of sucks for us, but that's one of the examples people talk about when they talk about breaking up big tech, right? These tech companies have too much power. Um, but thanks for that tangent discussion, Bryson. It was helpful. Jessica, any thoughts, ideas, comments?
I don't have any specific thoughts or ideas right now. I guess if the resources are limited in terms of just the current environment with the coronavirus, which is
Yeah,
top of mind,
yeah, yeah,
obviously. It's interesting watching how companies are having to respond to more of the like state mandated orders in terms of employees
yeah.
working from home and whatnot. And I'm in Washington right now where there's a pretty strict stay at home mandate. And there's a lot of the smaller companies that I follow are struggling because they can't have even online orders fulfilled right now,
Hmm.
which is just an interesting. Resources are incredibly constrained in that sense.
Yeah,
Um, and like an alternate revenue stream with online, which would seem pretty safe in this time, is all of a sudden affected as well, which is interesting.
yeah. It makes me think like I used to spend a lot of time in my class talking to students around like how to manage the job market because the job market was so bad like in 2009, 10, 11, 12, but it's gotten so much better that I've spent less time on that. But
Yeah.
when resources are limited is when you need to be hyper focused because you can't like it makes strategy even more important and aligning your kind of everything you do around one kind of point of success. So it's kind of like with the United States responding to coronavirus, it's like we've tried to do a little bit of everything and we've done everything pretty much poorly. Like we haven't built enough ICUs or ventilators. We haven't scaled up testing enough to track people and test on a wide enough scale that we can catch people who are infected but aren't showing symptoms. Um, we've kind of done some quarantine to slow the curve, but like not enforcing it all that well. So it's like we've kind of done everything haphazardly and poor. And it's like we're up against some serious competition. Like this virus has a lot of characteristics that make it really good at spreading. And so we should have
Hmm.
not felt like this rich country like we are in the United States and like, oh, we'll just do a little bit of everything and it'll work out. Like it's like when resources are limited, it's time to be like all in on one strategy and just go for it. And I guess like some poorer countries, I forget what all the examples are, but are doing a really good job limiting the spread because they're just like, we know our hospital system can't scale out. We know we can't build a bunch of ventilators. We're all going to stay home. Like we're not, no one's going outside. Like we know what we're up against, and we're just going to do extreme quarantine, like way more aggressively than we've done in the U.S. because they're realize that they have limited resources, and so they did go all in on one strategy, and they've done a better job of limiting the spread in their country so far. Um, but yeah, I think now's the time for like strategy. Like now's the time to really think about where you want to apply your efforts. Like both invest in your own skill development that's general, but also be very focused on like becoming an expert on some area of the world where you think there's growth opportunities because you can't just kind of scatterly try to do everything. Like focus on one thing really well when times are tight. But they kind of that's the thing about all four of these is they all build on top of each other, and so it's like if you think about how customers are changing, you're really thinking how customers are different because people change at different rates, and as competitors react, right, it's going to change what customers expect. So a lot of people talk about the Amazon effect, where Amazon's so good at delivering in 2 days, it just changes what people think of like the baseline, what's acceptable. And so if you can't meet that, like don't even bother to do online delivery. Like double down on doing a more important in-person experience, like Pal's Books in Portland or something. So they all these fit together, and they're all obvious, which is makes a lot of people ignore them because it's like, yeah, no duh. But um, whoever does it a little bit better than the rest is going to be the winner. And so there's always an opportunity for someone in last place or someone who's not even in a market to come up from nowhere and succeed because they're just adapting a little bit better to how customers are different, how customers are changing, new disruptions, um, and just being focused in their resources and finding the lead domino. Okay, so the goal in your marketing strategy, the long-term goal is you want to occupy a valuable position in the market. And so it's got to be valuable, differentiated, and defensible. Or another way people call it is they call it VRIN, valuable, rare, hard to imitate, and non-substitutable. So that would provide you a sustainable competitive advantage. And sometimes I have students um, come up to me or different people in industry. Sometimes people in industry will have me sign a non-disclosure agreement because they think they have some valuable idea and they're not sure it's defensible, and so they're like, "Let me keep it a secret." I'm never going to steal any of their ideas because I don't want to do all the hard work of starting the company. So I kind of laugh at it, and I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I'll sign your non-disclosure agreement." But the uh, if it is valuable and differentiated, and you can build a sustainable competitive advantage, you don't have to worry about secrets and stuff like that. Like it would just be almost impossible for anyone else um, to compete with you. And oftentimes students will say like, "Well, I'm excited about this because no one's ever done it before." Sometimes I wonder like maybe no one ever did it before for a reason. Like sometimes when I play basketball, one thing you can do like trash talking is if you're too lazy to play defense on someone and they catch the ball wide open, instead of like running out and trying to keep them from shooting, you just say open for a reason. And then you think they suck at shooting, and then if they're thinking about that, maybe they missed the shot. Um, doesn't work all the time, but so anyways, how do you get sustainable competitive advantage? There's three sources related to marketing. Okay, so there's other sources like just having great logistics and supply, chain power, like Walmart, but these are more what we can invest in as people interested in marketing. So we can develop a shared history, so a relationship with our customers, and really through trials and tribulations and experiments and stuff, we can show that we'll stick with them. We can show loyalty. We can show we're trustworthy. We can show we don't take advantage of them when times are tough. So like Airbnb right now um, is in trouble a bit because a lot of their hosts, people who put their properties up on Airbnb, are mad because Airbnb is letting all their travelers get refunded because of coronavirus. And so um, all these kind of hosts on Airbnb are like, we had this shared history. We built this business together. Like we were partners. And now in our time of need, you've kind of abandoned us. And so they're really upset. But for customers, they'll be like, well, I have this better relationship. I can trust Airbnb. Like they didn't like enforce their strict cancellation policy on me because coronavirus like was this unexpected huge major disruption to travel, and so they stuck with me. And so like if you have a shared history through some rocky times and you can show that you'll stick with someone, like that loyalty will build. So unfortunately for Airbnb, they kind of had to pick: do we go with our customers and let them cancel and refund them, or do we go with our hosts and let them basically, sorry, like we have a strict cancellation policy and you're not going to get refunded? And they decided to go with their customers and not with the hosts. But that was like a tough time. But you can have nostalgia work for you. You can have a sense of loyalty. what is a best friend? It's someone who you like a lot, but it's also someone who you've been through some real shit together, right? So um, that's one kind of source of sustainable competitive advantage, because a new company that shows up, is all glossy and happy and new, but you don't have that same connection. You don't have that trust. You don't know if they'll be there for you when times go bad. So shared history is one source of sustainable competitive advantage because it can't be replaced. It can't be copied. Um, Knowledge is related to it, right? You can learn some secrets. So if you're going after a certain market and you've developed the shared history, you develop knowledge about how things work, about how your customers react, the best way to talk to them, approach them, the flow of all the decisions that people go through when they're deciding whether to download calm.com or not, or Calm the app or not, right? All those kind of experiments and knowledge collectively can compound. So even if like a big company with lots of resources sees your growth and says, let me copy that, they still have to go through all the process of learning all of the exact kind of nuances of what it's like for your customer to experience um, all the kind of touch points that they encounter you, and adapt the design of how you present yourself, how you communicate, etc., to be able to onboard customers and get them using your service effectively and happily. And the last one is the collective and distributed image, so like brand. So if you have a brand that stands for something and other people know what it stands for, then one of your customers can, buy you, have that brand displayed on what they're doing, and it will communicate effectively to other customers. So like Patagonia is my favorite example, in that a lot of people know that Patagonia stands for concern for the environment and high quality um, goods. So if I want to communicate to other people that I care about the environment, I can wear Patagonia, and that can kind of signal what I value to others. And because I can reliably know that a lot of people kind of know what Patagonia represents, a new company could show up and also care maybe even more about the environment. Um, but because not a lot of people know that, one of their customers can't communicate that efficiently and effectively just with the brand image like Patagonia can. Or like another example that I like a lot is Nike, right? So if I buy some Nike basketball shoes and I'm this old, kind of relatively old compared to our students basketball player, but I got on the right basketball shoes, they might be willing to pass me the ball if I'm playing pickup, even though they don't know me, because at least I look like I know what I'm doing a little bit. I have like, these nice basketball shoes or whatever. Versus when I was younger, I could wear some crappy shoes and I'd want to be underestimated because then they wouldn't try as hard against me. And so like, it's a way of signaling who you are to others and to yourself only works if everybody knows collectively what the brand represents and the image that's associated with it. And so a Nike signing Giannis and LeBron and Kyrie Irving and KD to big multi-million-dollar contracts allows for this collective distributed image to exist among many people, and then people who want to associate themselves with that image can access it by buying those shoes. And so sometimes people think marketing and advertising and all that is meant to trick consumers into buying a shoe that's like, we spent, $20 to make this shoe, but we're going to charge you $150 to buy it. Well, they also spent, maybe, a couple $100 million on creating this image around their brand, such that we're not just buying the shoe, we're buying what the shoe represents to other people that we want to communicate with without having to, go up to everyone on your team and be like, I really love basketball, like, pass me the ball. You're going to say, like, hey, I look the right way, so pass me the ball. So those are three things that any, well-funded competitor can't just get overnight. And so that's why they're called sustainable competitive advantages. And they're built through customer relationships, through design, and through branding. Okay. Make sense? Any reactions to that? We're almost done, so we can power through. This took a lot longer than I thought it was going to. It's my first time doing this online setting here. The marketing strategy framework captures all of this in kind of one place. And so it's like all these different components of marketing strategy start out with data, research, and analysis of the three C's. So understanding the customers and their differences gives you an idea of where you want to compete, because you can also assess where you have relative strengths compared to your competitors, or at least where you want to be unique compared to your competitors, and all those things around generic strategies and understanding how customers are different and how they're changing. Those all come to bear here. Um, Segmentation is understanding the differences in customers and where they kind of tend to have similarities. So which segment of consumers are similar enough in what they're looking for that I can pick which one to go after, align my whole entire communication strategy, the design of my product, my services, my experience, such that it feels like it was made perfect for them. There's this term idiosyncratic fit. Have you guys heard of that? There's a loyalty paper called the Idiosyncratic Fit heuristic. I think it's Drez and Nunes. Either of you know that paper?
I think we talked about it in your class.
Okay. The idea is that we like something better if it feels like it's especially made for us and also not made for others. So like for loyalty programs, if we just barely get over the hurdle to get the benefits, we like that more than if like we got over it easily. Um, so if there's this idiosyncratic fit, which means it's like there's this, we're on the same wavelength, or this company's on the same wavelength of us, like they see me, feeling seen is something that's deeply satisfying as humans. It's partly why in-person classes work better than online, because you can feel seen, feel like your presence is recognized. And so targeting and aligning what you do to a customer is providing them this benefit of feeling seen, of having this idiosyncratic fit. If you think of like, I really vibe with someone, right? Or I'm kind of on the same wavelength. That's what that's all about. And positioning is just the alignment of everything you do in terms of your four P's. So we got the product, the place, the promotion, the pricing, the basics of marketing management at a high level. That's meant to be all about alignment and establishing that idiosyncratic fit with your target segment. And then lastly, we go beyond that in kind of the new version of marketing to consider customer management decisions. So what's our approach to acquisition? Who do we kind of go after? What's the prospects? What's the communication strategy like the first time they encounter us versus as they kind of go down the funnel and want to get more information? What's our kind of sales funnel look like? Once we acquire them, do we expand them? Are there any additional services we can provide? Retaining, we don't want to lose customers. Right? It might have taken us $100 of effort to get a customer. Once we got them, we want to hold on to them as long as we can. And then contagion is like, how do our efforts with any one customer get us to get other customers? So unfortunately, like in marketing, we talk about viral marketing all the time, which is around contagion, which is taking an existing user and turning them into new users. It's, unfortunate because we're probably going to have to change that terminology a bit given the coronavirus, as it kind of seems insensitive to this major thing hitting every aspect of the world. And so all that would kind of contribute to sales and profits. And so if you are doing marketing strategy, this is the organizing framework you can to kind of walk through all the aspects of, is our strategy mapping up with our tactics and what we're doing, and it hits all kind of aspects of the customer experience. So the key questions we're asking are, who are we going to serve? What are we going to provide? How do we reach them and engage them? And then how do we grow and build a source of sustainable competitive advantage? So students out there, use this framework, answer these questions, think through companies' marketing strategy, using this as a tool to diagnose who's got a good strategy, who has a poor strategy, or are they executing on their strategy well or not. Okay, excuse me. Okay, next I just want to cover in probably maybe 10 minutes the relation to business models and strategies. So there's different business models that can accompany different strategies, and I'm using the example of Gillette versus Dollar Shave Club. So they both ostensibly sell razors, right? They help customers shave, but they have different business models that allow them to have different strategies. So Gillette, their market is a lot of people think of them as a B2C company, so business to consumer instead of a business to business company. But in many ways, they're actually a business to business company. So they do B2C advertising, right? Gillette, the best a man can get. That's their advertising. They have Gillette Stadium, I think, the New England Patriots play there. They have lots of, maybe Tom Brady might be like athlete spokesperson for them. They do B2C advertising, but their distribution is indirect. They use a retail channel, so they have really strong relationships with Target, Walmart, supermarkets, any place that would sell consumer good, right? Consumer packaged good, which would be the razors. You have both the kind of the razor head and then also the kind of uh, disposable part that they can sell many of them. Um, they promote historically more through mass media than social media, and that's was a point of advantage for them, right? Because it mass media is only available to companies that have enough customers that you can divide the total cost of the advertising. Let's say you spend $10 million on a Super Bowl ad, but you're going to reach 10 million customers, and so it's just $1 per customer. But if you only have, let's say, 100,000 customers, a $10 million ad just doesn't equate correctly, right? It's too much money on a per customer basis. And so mass media fits with mass marketing, with mass brands. The segmentation, in order to go after a mass media strategy of promotion, means you have to have a pretty broad segmentation basis. So you're focused more on demographics rather than like very niche, like identity based. Like I think of myself as uh, a dad wannabe athlete, professor person, like right. So like you can have very specific psychographic, behavioral based segmentation, or you can have very broad demographic things. So like Gillette just goes after men who are professional of a certain income that can afford to like spend too much money on a razor. Um, so pretty broad, pretty mass market. Everything's aligned, right? Um, they use these kind of mass market retailers. They have mass market media. They have a mass market target basis, and the kind of sustainable competitive advantage they have is they have some big brand, right? High brand awareness they've built over many years. They have good relationships with all the retail distributors, so like Target and Walmart, and they probably have salespeople who know, the buyers for Target, the buyers for Walmart. Like they know them really well, take them out to dinner, et cetera, et cetera. And so they have this whole well-built business that has a certain business model with it. Dollar Shave Club tries to have a different business model, which is a service, and they are more of a B2C company because they're going to directly sell to end users. So their distribution channel is going to be through the mail, right? Using online ways of accessing the customer, getting them to sign up. They're going to use social media to promote and advertise. Their segmentation is going to be tighter. They're going to go after more of a niche of like, let's say, kind of like frat college age guys, early 20s, late teens who don't take themselves too seriously, kind of laugh at themselves, and there's kind of like a silliness or a funness to their brand, and they're going to be obviously trying to come in as at a lower price point. So much more of a niche, and they're going to build a direct relationship with their customers because they're going to have the credit card. They're going to know where you live. They're going to be able to sell additional products. Like once we have you buying one thing, we can get you to sell another thing. And so they have different business models, and their strategy fits their different business models. And because of that, Dollar Shave Club has been very successful. So let's just cover this real quick. So P&G, which owns Gillette, spent $2 billion on R&D in 2014. So they like have, how many razors can we fit on a razor head? I've got 5 blades. Woo, that's really impressive. That's double the amount that Unilever spent, which is their closest mass market competitor. P&G spent 10 billion on advertising, right? Mass media advertising, which is 37% more than Unilever. And they dominate retail space in all the kind of supermarkets, Target, Walmart, etc. They have the scale and they have the relationships to pull that off. But they're not built for going direct to consumer as Dollar Shave Club is. So Benedict Evans, he's kind of a tech strategy analyst, and he says most brands that we call a consumer are functionally actually a B2B business. So they sell to other companies, right? They're distribution partners, and they do parallel marketing, advertising, promotion to get consumers to buy their product from those companies. So that's pull marketing, right? Where you advertise to the end user and then they pull the product through the distribution channel. And before e-commerce, they'd never sold a thing to consumers themselves, and that's a really hard shift. So basically he's saying that they don't have the skill set, the psychology, the processes in place to build a kind of direct-to-consumer company. And so what happened is Gillette has lost a ton of market share, and that's basically because of optimal distinctiveness theory. And I'll kind of outline that real quick. So optimal distinctiveness is basically that we have two competing needs. I know you, Bryson, and Jessica know this, but speaking to the undergraduate students, on one end, we want to feel like we're unique. So that would be like wanting to be like a lone wolf, right? Feeling like we're unique and distinctive and have autonomy, right? Those are primal needs we all have. We also have a need for belonging. So wanting to feel like we fit in and we have security and safety of others. And our happiness is at some midpoint between this desire for uniqueness and autonomy and feeling like independence and our desires for security and belonging and comfort with others as social animals. And so this optimal level of being distinct means our most happiness is at some point between feeling like we're a member and feeling like we're a leader of some small tribe, right? Gillette, though, was really trying to say, hey, you guys are members of this kind of big group of men who want to be the best a man can get. And that meant there was room for improvement on the optimal distinctiveness scale, which allows for niche brands to come in and target certain identities. So Dollar Shave Club targeted kind of like young, kind of like frat guys, let's say, or early career guys who didn't want to take themselves too serious and liked humor. Bevel targeted people that generally were darker skin tone, darker, curlier hair. So maybe like in the U.S., the more ethnic minorities that are growing in numbers and purchasing power. And Bevel actually was purchased by Unilever. No, by P&G. Bevel was purchased by P&G. Dollar Shave Club was purchased by Unilever. Harry's was going to get bought out, but then I think our FTC said that it would be anti-competitive, so they wanted Harry's to be an independent competitor, but Harry's kind of targets people who maybe have some like I want to say like uppity high self-concept, like I want to think like Oxford, like London is kind of like their brand positioning, but they all kind of target a more tightly defined group of people. With kind of a particular identity focus, so a sense of belonging, a sense of being unique and being a certain person. And so they've all collectively taken a lot of market share from Gillette, and Gillette's kind of fallen on hard times. And so the winners of this has been Unilever is not a winner, they're just a competitor. P&G is not a winner, they're just a competitor. Harry's has raised money by being effective here, but Facebook, Google, Snapchat, those are the big winners because all these direct-to-consumer companies have to spend a bunch of money on basically social media advertising so that they can target the specific person who would use their product and like their product and not spend any money advertising to someone who wouldn't like their product, who wouldn't resonate, who wouldn't care for it. So they don't do big mass media spending. So TV's a loser here, but and also like Target and Walmart are kind of losers here too as well. But they do spend a bunch of money on these kind of highly targeted online advertising platforms that allow them to kind of build a brand around an identity of unique users. And if you're P&G and you spend $10 million on a Super Bowl ad on TV, it maybe is $1 per customer because you have 10 million people watching the Super Bowl. Facebook and Google also allow a Dollar Shave Club to spend $1 per customer because they might just spend, $10,000, but they're going to target 10,000 people. So because Facebook allows different ads for every different user, any small company can, on a per customer basis, spend a reasonable amount of money exposing their brand to their target customer. Are you guys both familiar with Dollar Shave Club?
Yes, I am.
Hi, I don't know if our
Yes.
students are, so I'm going to show them this. Can you see this video?
Yep.
All right, so this is the original brand launch for Dollar Shave Club.
Hi, I'm Mike, founder of DollarShaveClub.com. What is DollarShaveClub.com? Well, for $1 a month, we send high-quality razors right to your door. Yeah, $1. Are the blades any good? No. Our blades are f***ing great. Each razor has stainless steel blades, an aloe vera lubricating strip, and a pivot head. It's so gentle a toddler could use it. And do you like spending $20 a month on brand name razors? 19 go to Roger Federer. I'm good at tennis. And do you think your razor needs a vibrating handle, a flashlight, a back scratcher, and 10 blades? Your handsome-ass grandfather had 1 blade and polio. Looking good, Pop-Up! Stop paying for shave tech you don't need. And stop forgetting to buy your blades every month. Alejandro and I are going to ship them right to you. We're not just selling razors, we're also making new jobs. Alejandro, what were you doing last month?
Not working.
What are you doing now?
Working.
I'm no Vanderbilt, but this train makes hay. So stop forgetting to buy your blades every month and start deciding where you're going to stack all those dollar bills I'm saving you. We are DollarShaveClub.com, and the party is on.
Okay, so what I really like about that, going back to the original talk we talked about what strategy is that commercial goes in a direction and it goes away from a lot of other directions. So I could imagine, my dad thinking that was incredibly stupid and dumb and also maybe even offensive and whatever. But the point is to satisfy someone on optimal distinctiveness, right? It's that idiosyncratic fit. So it's not only that it might resonate or be funny or be silly with, like, let's say a 23-year-old. It's that the 23-year-old knows that, like, that's designed for them and is very much different from the P&G Gillette positioning, right? So it's that uniqueness that really pays off. Okay, I went way longer than I thought I would, so I'm going to call that good for today. I was going to talk a little bit about B2B markets and what the difference is between product and service versus service and platform. But yeah, I think we've spent more time than most of my students are going to want to spend watching a video. Anyways,
Great work.
no, great appreciation for both of you sitting through this. I know that sitting through undergrad lectures isn't your idea of a fun Sunday, but I hope it made it a little bit more interesting and entertaining for the students. So thank you, Bryson. Thank you, Jessica. Students, I'll see you on Zoom or this discussion boards, and hope you guys are doing well. I need a sign-off phrase in the future, but so long.
Thank you. So long.